Yo guys, it's Foxen, back at it again with a new What If. Hope you enjoy this video. Don't forget to click the like button, subscribe, and comment down below future ideas for What Ifs and your opinion on this one.
Izuku was fighting off the Nomus when he got a distress call from a smartwatch his brother gave him on his birthday. This watch was used in order to communicate between the brothers if there was any danger. When Izuku got this message, you can say that his heart dropped, because with the recent news that the hero killer has escaped, Shinso could be anywhere in any sort of danger. He doesn't really know what it is, and he knows that his brother, he can't really fight off strong villains if the villains know what the quirk of the hero is, and the hero killer is notorious for studying his opponents before he kills them. So immediately Izuku starts running through the alleyways of Hosu City in order to catch up to Shinso and, stop the danger. And when he arrives at the alleyway, his guess was proven to be correct. It was the hero killer, who was about to stab Shinso in the heart with his blade. And Todoroki, well, he was passed out right next to Shinso. Izuku, without waiting, immediately uses his quirk to say stop. This freezes the hero killer. Immediately, Izuku runs up to Shinso and to check up on his wounds and sees that Shinso is extremely hurt. He's badly wounded. He's got scratch marks, stabs everywhere. And at this point, Izuku is extremely scared for his brother and his life. And because he was so worried about his brother, he does not notice how the hero killer already broke free from the effects of the quirk, and how the hero killer came up behind him and ran his blade right through his back. And so now the hero killer jumps back and uses his quirk on Izuku. And that's when Izuku gets paralyzed. He falls to the ground with convulsions. The hero killer then comes closer and he tells Izuku, well, I was told to bring you alive, but I'll have to disregard his order. You're quite strong. You're dangerous. And the hero killer is about to stab Izuku right in the heart, but because Izuku had the O blood type, and basically I'm giving him plot armor right now, but because he had the type O blood type, the effects of Stain's quirk don't really affect him for that long, and so he breaks free right before he was about to get stabbed, and he immediately uses his quirk to say push. This pushes the hero killer into a wall, and then Izuku barely stands up with the blade through his basically back. He barely stands up and looks at the hero killer with like a death stare, and immediately says burst. And this basically makes the hero killer just burst like a bubble. All the organs, everything flying around, pretty gruesome. But after that, Izuku coughs out a huge chunk of blood, basically blood everywhere, and then he just passes out. After this, Izuku wakes up in the hospital, and he looks around, and he sees Shinso on one side, who's already awake, and Todoroki on the other side, who's also awake. And Izuku sees them too and says, Shinso, bro, what happened? And Shinso's like, well, I woke up in that alley, and as soon as I did, the police and the heroes, they came, and I told them what happened, at least what I saw, and they took us to the hospital, and that's the last I remember. And Izuku's then, okay, so then why am I handcuffed to the bed? And Shinso says, I don't really know about that, man. They said that it was for safety measures. After that, 3 people walk in. 1 policeman in uniform, Eraserhead, or Raizawa, in his hero outfit, as well as Nezu. And these 3 people, they sit around the 3 boys, and the policeman starts the talk. Izuku Hitoshi explained what happened in full detail. And I'm not going to go over it again, but Izuku explains everything that happened, everything as he saw it, everything that he did to the hero killer, to the exact detail. And the policeman said, so you want me to believe that a regular high school student killed the hero killer? That pro heroes can't even handle. And Aizawa then says, "Oh, well, sir, that is no regular student. He's the number one in the class with an incredibly powerful and dangerous quirk. His story is highly believable. If it was any other person, it would have been not, but it's him." The policeman then says, "Well, anyways, the police will take credit for the kill." Izuku then has a bit of a shock on his face, and he says, "On what accord?" The policeman then says, "You don't have a hero license yet, so you can't even use your quirk legally. I'll bypass and ignore your crimes to say for this time, but I won't be so lenient next time." Izuku, he can't really do anything yet. He can't really do anything about this because he did do something very illegal. He used his quirk, even if it was self-protection, self-defense, it's still illegal. And so he just accepted the fact. And so we do a time skip of 3 weeks, and Izuku can't really participate in the finals because from the fight of the hero killer, his throat is still pretty damaged. He can't really do anything about that. And he gets a different exam. His exam is a 1v2 against Aizawa and Gunhead in pure hand-to-hand combat. No quirks, nothing. Just pure skill, pure strength, test it out. And so it's a 1v2. Izuku against the two pro heroes who specialize in martial arts, basically. And so this time, Izuku manages to hold on for about 15 minutes in a serious fight against these two, who are attacking in very coordinated patterns and just professional overall. And he also manages to do some pretty good damage, like land some hits on Aizawa, land some kicks and punches on Gunhead. But in the end, he does lose because he got cornered and got hurt. And basically, he loses still, but he manages to pass the exam with pretty much perfect marks. It's unheard of that a student of his age is able to stand up to 3 heroes in a pure hand-to-hand combat fight. And both heroes know that if Aizawa did not have his quirk, they'd both be dead, because Izuku's quirk is just on another level. They also call it basically human cheating. And in another 3 weeks after the final exam, Aizawa announces to the class that the whole 1A class and 1B, I think, are gonna go to the forest training camp hosted by the Wild Wild Pussycats, of course. And I'm not gonna talk about how they went there, how the bus fell, but nothing like that. But I'm just gonna talk about the exercises that Izuku did. Basically, his exercises consisted of standing in front of multiple trees and just saying the word break using his quirk as many times as possible. This was to increase his resistance to his own quirk, as well as strengthen his quirk. And this time, Izuku, he really isn't one for hero talk and doesn't really care about Kota and his problems with his family. But Shinso, he does, and he is the one to console him this time. And yeah, so one night Izuku's training again in the forest relentlessly while everybody else is like doing something else, I don't know. And he's training it, and that's when he hears loud noises and like booms and crashes and voices everywhere around him. And he starts to look around, and at one point he goes from a bush and sees 3 villains. He sees the famous fire villain Dabi. He sees Toga, and he sees what's his name? The lizard dude. What's his name? Spike? Well, no. I don't remember his name. Lizard dude, whatever. And basically, what he witnesses is something quite unusual this time. He sees Toga getting, not bullied by, but like being pushed around by the lizard dude. The lizard dude's like calling her names and stuff like that. And Izuku can't stand that because, Toga is his old classmate. And so he jumps out, and in quite a lot of anger, he just says to the lizard dude, "Burst." And this is just a one shot, one kill. The lizard dude bursts, like blood everywhere, organs everywhere. But this does cause a lot of damage to Izuku's throat already. And Izuku does realize that that was a very dumb move. He should have just broken one of Lizard's hands or something. But, you know, it can't be undone. But now Dabi sees Izuku, and Dabi uses a giant burst of blue fire on Izuku. And, you know, this ain't much for our boy. Izuku just uses the word stop on the fire. And after that, Izuku goes a bit to the side, and he says break. And this breaks both of Dabi's legs. But after that, Izuku spits out a huge chunk of blood. But he barely manages to talk. And so he says, Toga, what are you doing? Why are you here? And Toga says, in disbelief, Izuku, is that you? Our boy then responds, yes. Yeah, it's me. Why did you disappear all those years ago? And Toga starts holding her head in pain and says, I can't disobey him. They're controlling me. And Izuku asks in panic, who's doing this? Toga then says, I don't know his name. I know, but I can't say it. Izuku then uses his last resort, sort of one of his strongest words on Toga. He says the word free. And after that, Toga passes out. Basically what he did is that he freed Toga from all the third-party effects that were on her. So any mind control quirk is gonna basically fall apart. Even if it's the strongest thing, it's just gonna break off. But Izuku's like spitting a lot of blood right now. He's very weakened, and that's when Shinso appears. And he starts looking after his brother, saying, like, you know, looking around, asking what's happening, trying to, like, help his brother, but he really can't, because, you know, it's internal damage. That's when Muscular, Moonfish, and Mr. Compress appear. And Moonfish, without hesitation, just launches his blades from his nails, I think, or from his teeth. Yeah, from his teeth. And Izuku uses his quirk to say break on the blades. The blades break, but at what cost? The damage to Izuku's throat is beyond what he's ever gone through. And Muscular then runs up to the unassuming Izuku, who's still recovering from the word break. He runs up to Izuku and just punches him into the tree with full force. Shinso tries binding Muscular with his ropes, but, you know, the same much for Muscular. Muscular breaks free from the ropes and kicks Shinso into a tree. Izuku then says to Muscular, twist. This twists Muscular neck and pretty much kills him. But Izuku spits out even more blood, and he's on the verge of passing out, like he can see different colors now and stuff. Moonfish then launches his blades at Izuku and stabs both of his legs. Izuku can't move now, he's paralyzed. Shinso is, you know, Izuku, he passes out from the shock, and Shinso, he sees this, and he's unable to help his brother, he's unable to stand up, because his brother is, he's unable to stand up because both of his ribs are broken from the punch that Muscular gave him. And Shinso then sees that Mr. Compress is coming closer to Izuku, and Shinso starts insulting Mr. Compress, trying to make him talk, trying to use his quirk. But, you know, Mr. Compress isn't dumb. He knows about Shinso's quirk. And so Mr. Compress manages to put Izuku into one of his little balls. That sounds bad, but he does. And after that, the heroes appear, and at the same time that the heroes appear, Kurogiri also appears, and he quickly puts in the portals and teleports Izuku, Dabi, Mr. Compress, and he actually leaves Toga behind, who's still alive, but Kurogiri thought she's dead. And basically, the Wild Wild Pussycats who came along with Aizawa, they realized what just happened, and Aizawa is super mad, because, you know, Izuku was still a student, and he's super mad right now. He sees all the dead bodies on the ground and realizes that's what Izuku did to all the villains. And he also sees a girl on the ground who wasn't injured in any way, but he remembers that Nezu warned him about this girl. And so, by the end of the day, everybody's being taken care of, everybody's arriving to hospitals, and everyone's just safe. But Shinso wakes up, and it's already morning. Basically, he can't really move his ribs. He can't move because his ribs are broken, but it's healing because of Recovery Girl. And Aizawa then, he comes in, and immediately Shinso, without even greeting him, says, "Where's Izuku?" And Aizawa says, "We don't really know yet, but he was taken by the villains." And Shinso, he slams the bed, and says, "We have to hurry. He's in danger." And Aizawa says, "Of course he's in danger. Come with me." And he puts Shinso into a wheelchair, and they both drive to a separate room. And they go into this room, and this is sort of like this prison interrogation thing. They're behind a clear mirror, and behind on the other side, behind on the other side is a police investigator and Toga, and they're sitting across the table. And the policeman is talking to Toga, and he says, "Why were you working with the villains?" Toga then says, "I was being controlled." And the policeman says, "Exactly how? How are you being controlled to the point where you had to commit such crimes? You're a notorious B-rank villain. And you're saying all of that was because you're controlled? Don't make me laugh." And Toga then says with tears, and she says he had a quirk that allowed him to manipulate and play with people's minds if they were already hurt. And the policeman says, "How and who?" And Toga explains all her situation about how she was bullied and about how she was sad all the time. And then she explains that, and then basically the policeman says, okay, I understand, but who was the one who was controlling you?" And then Toga, in a very scared voice, she's like shivering inside, says, "All for one." And Aizawa then walks in the room, breaking off the conversation, and says, "Where is the villain hideout? Tell me now." Toga then says, "There's multiple." And Aizawa then says, the one that they took Izuku to." And Toga then says, "Huh?" In shocked voice, "They took Izuku?" And Aizawa then says, "Yes. And I know you two were very close in the past. So do us a favor and help us out." And Toga then tells the heroes about all the different hideouts and the one where she thinks that they took Izuku to. And so the heroes start preparing a raid for the hideout, for all the different hideouts. But we need to cut to the hideout. What's going on inside there? Izuku, at this time, wakes up in a room. He's tied to a chair. And he sees all these villains in front of him. He sees Shigaraki. He sees some other guys. He sees Dabi in a wheelchair because of his legs. And he sees that there's just too many villains to use his quirk and not get hurt. And he's still having a bad throat from all the words he used yesterday. And Izuku then says, "What do you want from me?" Shigaraki then smiles and says, "All I want is to make a simple proposal to you." And Izuku, with like a bland voice, and says, "I'm not listening." And Shigaraki laughs and chuckles and says, "You caused us a lot of trouble yesterday. The least you could do is listen to our proposal. Join us. Join us and we will give you any strength that you imagine. You will be invincible. You will be the ultimate quirk user and the ultimate life form." And Izuku says, "I'm already overpowered. I don't really need you guys." And nothing that the villains are saying and keep saying is working to convince Izuku to join them. But suddenly, a voice is heard. And the voice says in a very menacing tone, "Izuku Hitoshi, you have a younger brother, if I remember right?" And Izuku immediately begins to be on guard. And he says, "So you're the puppet master, the one behind the scenes." And the voice then says, "You could say that." you know, you would do great as a villain. If you join us, you could truly protect your brother. You could protect all those people you love. But Izuku just ignores him. He knows that what the voice is saying is just trying to play with him. He's trying to mess with him. And the voice then chuckles and says, "You will realize soon." But the man can't even finish his sentence as All Might bursts through the roof with the other heroes. Endeavor, Miracle, everyone. And Izuku then laughs out loud in sort of like a maniac voice and says, "Ha, I told you they'd come for me." And then Miracle, the rabbit hero, takes Izuku outside, straight to Recovery Girl, while All Might, Endeavor, and Edgeshot are wreaking havoc across the villain hideout. Basically, just they're not afraid to hurt the villains this time, basically. And that's when Nomus appear out of nowhere. And All Might is fighting all the Nomus. All the heroes are preoccupied. They're all doing their job. And that's when All for One himself comes. And he comes from behind and injures the unsuspecting All Might. And All Might can't really counter this because he didn't see it. And so both of them begin to get into a huge brawl. All Might's using all of his smashes, Detroit, USA, everything. And All for One's using all of his many quirks. And they both fight, but this time All for One is winning. He's getting the upper hand because of the initial wound on All Might. And at one point All Might gets punched into a wall and he spits out some blood. And Izuku sees this and he basically comes up with a plan to stop All for One and help All Might. Basically, he finds a random scarf laying around on the ground, and he tells Recovery Girl to get on his back now. And she is confused, but she complies. And Izuku ties Recovery Girl to his back, sort of like Izuku did in canon with Eri during the Yakuza arc. So basically now instead of Eri, it's Recovery Girl. And I think you all know where this is going. But because with Recovery Girl now, Izuku looks at All for One and just says, "Incinerate." And this is one of his most powerful words, of course. And All for One lights up on fire. And he's in a lot of pain because he didn't expect Izuku to be back in the fight so early. But Izuku's side effects from this quirk are basically nullified because now he's got Recovery Girl who's healing him. Basically, Recovery Girl is now acting like Eri. She's not rewinding, but she's just healing him very fast. Because it's not a big area to heal like the legs. It's a very small area like the voice box. So it's very easy for her to heal this very fast. And All for One recovers from the Incinerate that Izuku launched at him earlier. And he launches these like red spikes from his nails at Izuku. But Izuku just says stop. After that, he says redirect. And this launches the nails back at All for One. Meanwhile, Izuku's getting healed. All for One, he manages to dodge the nails and begins his attack on Izuku with his different quirks. He comes up close, but Izuku uses his quirk to say boost. And with incredible speed and strength, he punches All for One into the liver. And this shocks All for One because he wasn't expecting such power. After that, Izuku, he goes into a rage, into a sort of like a berserk form. His eyes light up red, his hair begins to flare up, and Izuku just starts using all of his different words. He says cut, he says burst, he says break, incinerate, electrify, freeze. All of the words he can think of to harm All for One, he's using them. And All for One, he can't defend. Izuku, he is getting damaged, but not as much as he would regularly because he's getting healed by Recovery Girl. And at one point, Izuku stops and with a menacing tone says, die. And this is when a giant sound wave comes from Izuku's mouth. It sort of forms like a singularity. It's like, if you remember from Kung Fu Panda, when in the first movie where, you know, Po used the skadoosh thing. This is sort of what happens after Izuku says the word die using his quirk. And all for one, he dies on the spot. He's dead, he can't come back. But from using this word, it's the most powerful word in his arsenal. Izuku's neck basically bursts open and he falls to the ground unconscious. Shinso and Toga are watching, you know, from the TV, and they thought that Izuku just died. And they all start shouting, "No, Izuku," and stuff like that. But All Might, he's managing to recover from his wound, and he's slowly crawling to Izuku. And once he reaches him, he touches Izuku and manages to transfer one for all to Izuku, stabilizing his condition. That's when Recovery Girl, who's extremely tired and extremely fatigued from all the previous healing she had to do, but she manages to find the strength in herself, and she starts healing Izuku. And in the aftermath of the battle, All for One is pronounced dead. His body was found. No sign of life. Shigaraki and all the other villains were disbanded because Shigaraki still was not ready to become the successor of All for One, so he had no way of contacting Dr. Ujiko, who didn't see even a point in continuing with Shigaraki. Izuku got taken to the hospital where the nation's best inventors, best, people started working on making him a prosthetic voice box and lungs because they were extremely damaged during the fight. The operations and the prosthetics were successful, and Izuku now, instead of having a regular human body, he's got sort of like metal lungs and a metallic voice box, and you can see it. I mean, I can't really describe it, but imagine that like there's a piece of metal on his throat, and that's his new voice box. And Izuku, he wakes up in a hospital bed, and he sees Shinso, Toga, All Might, and Aizawa sitting there around him. And as soon as Toga sees Izuku awake, she immediately goes up to hug Izuku, And Shinso he can't hold back the tears. He's very emotional that his brother is alive. He's very glad. And All Might then says, "Well, now you're my successor." Izuku's a bit confused, but All Might explains one for all to everyone. And Izuku, in his new, a bit of a more robotic voice, and says, "I'm honored, All Might, but I know a person who's much more deserving of this power, and he would greatly benefit from such a power boost." And All Might's like, "Who is it?" Izuku then looks at Shinso and says, "My brother." Shinso then says, "No, Izuku, you can't. You were given this power, so use it." And Izuku says, "I'm gonna have to admit this, but I'm already having a hard time with my own quirk. And from the damage I sustained, I believe it'll take a bit of time to get accustomed. I believe you'll be a much better user for this quirk." And after that, Izuku plucks one of his own hairs out and just basically 1, 2, 3, and he just shoves it down. Izuku shoves it down Shinso's mouth, basically transferring all of the power that All Might gave him. And this is the birth of a new generation of heroes, a new symbol of peace, and a future #1 hero.
Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this what if. Don't forget to click the like button, subscribe, and comment down your ideas for future what ifs, and your opinion on this video. See you next time.